The morning bells at Haverleigh Park tolled 6 times, slow and solemn, as if the house itself already sensed scandal. A thin mist clung to the lawns, silvering the hedges and dulling the gilt on the carriages lined at the front. Inside, the air smelled of coal smoke and lavender polish, the scent of wealth carefully maintained, and nerves barely so. In the servants' hall, Anna Fletcher, the youngest of the maids, stood with her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles showed white. Her cap sat crooked on her dark hair, her apron still damp from scrubbing the marble steps at dawn. Around her, the other servants whispered in knots, frightened voices trying not to sound like gossip. At the far end of the hall, Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper, held up a small velvet pouch that caught the morning light like something sinful. The ruby brooch was found in her trunk, Mrs. Hartwell said, her tone grave but theatrical. His lordship's property. The very one gone missing after Lady Pembroke's visit last night. Anna shook her head, throat dry. I swear, ma'am, I've never seen it before. The butler, Mr. Cross, cleared his throat, a sound of authority sharpened by disapproval. We searched every servant's quarters. Only yours contained the missing piece. I've no reason to take it, Anna said, her voice cracking. I couldn't sell a thing like that, even if I wished. Mrs. Hartwell's mouth tightened. There is always reason when pride meets poverty. The door opened behind them, and a hush fell as Lord Haverleigh entered, tall, severe, a man who wore restraint like armour. His coat was buttoned too high for comfort, his expression higher still. Is this the girl? He asked. Yes, my lord, said Mrs. Hartwell. She was taken on 2 months ago from the vicarage school. Good references, but one never truly knows Lord Haverleigh studied Anna as if she were a document in poor ink. You understand the gravity of theft in my household? I didn't steal it, she whispered. Please, my lord, I didn't. He turned to Mr. Cross. Send for the constable. A ripple moved through the servants, shock, pity, fear of contagion. Anna's knees went weak. Please, my lord, let me speak. You've spoken enough. His voice carried the chill of a man more wounded by inconvenience than crime. My family's guests trust this house with their safety, their belongings, and their honour. One broken oath stains all 3. At that moment, a new voice cut through the air, young, hesitant, but clear. Father, wait. From the doorway of the breakfast room stood Edward, the Earl's only son, 17, pale from weeks of illness, a walking reminder that Haverleigh's fortune might end with him. He leaned on a cane, his breath uneven. She wouldn't steal, he said quietly. She brought me books from the village when I couldn't rise. She reads to me in the afternoons. Lord Haverleigh's eyes flicked toward his son, not softened, but calculating. Kindness does not preclude guilt. Nor does rank, Edward replied. Gasps trembled among the staff. The Earl's gaze hardened. Go back to your room, Edward. You're unwell. I'm well enough to see injustice, the boy said. Then coughed, the sound tearing through his words. Anna stepped forward. My lord, please. I never meant to cause trouble. If it pleases you, I'll leave quietly. No need for the constable. You will leave, the Earl said, and I shall see to it no house takes you on again. Mrs. Hartwell, pay her half wages and escort her off the grounds. The pouch glinted like blood as it passed from hand to hand. Anna curtsied, though her legs trembled. Yes, my lord. Outside, the mist had thickened into a thin rain. She crossed the courtyard with her bundle of belongings, little more than a comb, 2 letters from her sister, and a Bible worn soft from nights of hope. The servants watched from the windows, some ashamed, some relieved it wasn't them. As the gates closed behind her, thunder rumbled distantly. She walked down the lane until Haverleigh was only a grey silhouette through trees. Only then did she let herself cry, quietly, because tears changed nothing and cost everything. By afternoon, she reached the edge of the village. The sign above the blacksmith's read, "Carter and Son," and the forge hissed like breath. She paused under the eaves, unsure where to go. She had no family nearby, no references left unspoiled. "Miss Fletcher?" She turned. Edward stood there, wrapped in a cloak, his cane sinking into the mud. He looked far too pale to be outside. "My lord." "Don't call me that," he said, wincing as he caught his breath. "You shouldn't be walking in the rain. Nor should you," she answered. "If your father—" "He won't know," Edward said. "I wanted to bring this." He held out a small parcel wrapped in paper. Inside was a loaf of bread and a flask. "Mrs. Hartwell baked too much for luncheon." Her eyes filled again, for different reasons. "You shouldn't risk angering him." "I've angered him my whole life," he said, with the weary humor of someone too young to sound that old. "If you didn't take it, I'll find who did." "You can't," she said softly. "He won't believe you. You're his son, but you're still a boy. And you're a maid, but you told the truth," he said. "That's worth more than his title." She shook her head. "It won't feed me." "Then let me," he said, and promptly swayed, catching the fence for balance. Without thought, she stepped forward, steadying him by the arm. His sleeve was damp, his skin burning with fever. "You shouldn't be out. You need rest." He smiled faintly. "You still care. Even after—" His voice faltered. "Because you're kind," she said, "and because kindness is rarer than bread." He tried to laugh, but it became another cough. His weight sagged against her. "Anna?" he murmured. "I can't—" He collapsed. The cane fell into the mud. The loaf tumbled from her arms. Panic shot through her. His face had gone ashen, his breathing shallow. "Edward!" she cried, shaking him. No answer. She knelt, pressing her ear to his chest, a faint heartbeat, fading. The road was empty. Haverleigh lay nearly a mile back through rain. She could not carry him that far. Not alone. "Please," she whispered to the sky. "Don't let him die for my sake." Her gaze darted to the forge. A stable cart stood nearby, half covered by tarp. She dragged him toward it with desperate strength, lifted him inside, and threw the tarp over them both as the heavens opened. His pulse fluttered weakly beneath her hand. She remembered how he'd said he couldn't breathe when the damp set in, how the doctor warned of weakness in his heart. "Stay with me," she said, rubbing his hands to keep the blood moving. "You'll not die in the mud, not while I can fight it." The cart smelled of hay and rust. She found a blanket, wrapped him tight, then jumped down and seized the reins. The blacksmith's old mare blinked at her, confused. "Back to Haverleigh," Anna whispered, "and hurry." The mare snorted, as if insulted by the suggestion of speed, but obeyed. The cart jolted forward into the storm. Behind her, the road turned to water. Ahead, lightning revealed the turrets of Haverleigh Hall like a ghost awakening. Somewhere inside, Lord Haverleigh was likely finishing luncheon, content that order had been restored. He would soon learn that order has a heartbeat, and it refuses to die quietly. The cart rattled like a box of bones as Anna urged the mare up the dripping lane. Rain hammered the tarp above Edward's pale face, each strike a drumbeat counting down. The hedges blurred into dark walls. The gravel drive of Haverleigh flared white under lightning, then vanished again. "Hold on," she whispered, though he could not hear. She lifted the tarp to check his breathing. shallow, quick, like a bird's. She slid a hand beneath his neck and loosened the stiff collar, propping his shoulders with the folded blanket so his chest could lift. The warmth of him frightened her, fever and fear pretending to be life. The lodgekeeper squinted into the rain as the cart lurched through the gates. "Ho there! Who's—" "Anna Fletcher," she cried. "His lordship's son. He's taken ill." The old man's eyes widened. The gate swung full. "To the service door, girl. I'll ring the bell." By the time the cart thudded into the cobbles of the stable yard, figures were already hurrying from the kitchen passage, aprons flapping like startled birds. Mrs. Hartwell appeared at their head, face pinched to an even sharper point. "What is this nonsense?" Anna flung back the tarp. "He collapsed in the village." The housekeeper's breath snagged. Behind her, the cook crossed herself. Mr. Cross, the butler, materialized as if the rain had assembled him. "Get him inside," he said, carefully. James, lift from the shoulders. Easy now. They carried Edward through the scullery and along the service corridor, where steam fogged the air and flagstones sweated. Servants parted, whispering, their eyes darting between the unconscious heir and the dismissed thief who had fetched him home. "Not through the hall," Mr. Cross commanded. "The blue parlour, closest fire." They laid Edward on the chaise near the hearth. Ash flurried from the grate. The clock on the mantel ticked with outrageous calm. Anna knelt and set 2 fingers to his throat. The pulse stuttered, skipped, came again. Mrs. Hartwell hovered, flustered into prayer. "I'll send for the doctor. He needs warmth and air now," Anna said. "The doctor will be an hour in the rain." She whipped a blanket from the sofa arm and tucked it firm around Edward's ribs, leaving the chest free. "Hot water bottles?" "Brick from the oven." "Tea." "No milk," Mrs. Hartwell bristled. "You are not in charge here." "Would you like him dead while we debate?" Anna's voice surprised even herself, steady as a rung bell. Mr. Cross didn't hesitate. "Cook, bricks and bottles. Hartwell, the tea. Martha, fetch the Earl." They worked. The kitchen sent up heat in kettles and bricks wrapped in toweling. Anna slid 2 against Edward's feet, one under the blanket at his flank. She lifted his chin to open the throat, wiped rainwater from his lashes. His breath rasped. The skin over his cheekbones shone too bright. "Edward." She bent close. "It's Anna. You're safe. Breathe with me." She drew slow air herself, exaggerated like teaching a child to blow out a candle. In, out, in, out. His chest fought, then obeyed by inches. The door at the far end creaked. Lord Haverleigh strode in, the storm caught in his coat. His gaze fixed on his son, then flicked to Anna like a lash. "What have you done?" "Saved him from the mud you sent him into," she said, before caution could strangle her. "He sought me." He collapsed. "He needs air, heat, quiet." The Earl's jaw worked. "Where is Dr. Worsley?" "On the road," Mr. Cross answered. "In this weather." Lord Haverleigh knelt awkwardly by the chaise. The pose undid something about him. His height had nowhere to go. He touched Edward's forehead, snatched his hand back at the heat. A second's naked terror showed, then armour slammed into place. "We'll move him to his bed." "Not yet," Anna said. "Let his lungs settle." "He's breathing easier here." He looked up slowly, as one might rise to a duel. "You address me as though you remain under my roof." "I address you as the person nearest your son's breath," she said. "If you care for titles more than air, send me out." They stared at one another. In the space between them, the boy's breath slipped once, caught again. Lord Haverleigh exhaled. "Do as she says," he said to the room. and the butler's eyebrows twitched so slightly that only the clock noticed. Minutes lengthened like wet rope. The house tightened into silence around one sound, a young man trying not to drown on land. Then a cough, low, tearing. Edward's eyes dragged open as if from a bad dream. He focused on the ceiling, on the hearth, on Anna bending over him. "You," he whispered, "knew you'd ignore orders." "I learned from the best," she said, and only then realized she'd taken his hand. She let it go. He caught her fingers again, stubborn and small, like the heart still fighting in him. The doctor arrived with thunder, coat shining, spectacles fogged. "Out, out!" He barked at everyone but the Earl and Anna, whom he mistook for a nurse by the set of her mouth. He listened, tapped, peered, and harumphed. A chill settled on a weak heart. He must not exert. No draughts, broth. If the fever climbs, mustard plaster to the chest. He peered at Anna. "You did right, girl." "Who are you?" "No one," she said. "She is no longer in service," Lord Haverleigh said, as if he were reminding the heir of its obligations. "Then you are blessed that dismissal does not forbid sense," Dr. Worsley said, short as a snapped twig. "Come, my lord. The boy sleeps. Let him sleep." Edward's grip tightened. "Stay," he breathed to Anna, eyes already sliding closed. The Earl saw the fingers, the plea, the smallness of the request beside the size of the house. He rose slowly. "Mr. Cross, see Miss Fletcher, Anna, to a chair by the fire. Mrs. Hartwell, relieve her when she tires." It was not an apology, but it was a crack in marble. They sat vigil. Rain thinned to a steady stitch across the windows. Footsteps softened along corridors, as if the house were walking on the sides of its feet. In the quiet, Anna's eyes drifted to the small velvet pouch on the side table, the brooch's prison, forgotten in the flurry when they'd brought Edward in. The drawstring's tassel was torn, fibres splayed like burst veins. She remembered something, the pantry that morning, before the search. A maid's sewing roll unrolled in haste. Red silk thread, brighter than any servant could afford, snagged through a coarse darning needle. Whose? Lottie, Lady Pembroke's maid, loaned from the guest wing. A fast hand with a hem, and faster with a smile for footmen. Lottie, who had lingered by the back stairs after midnight, whispering to Blake, the under footman with a new polished boot and no raise to pay for it. "Are you asleep, Miss Fletcher?" Mrs. Hartwell's voice startled her. "No, ma'am." Anna straightened. "Only thinking." "Dangerous," the housekeeper said. But some of the starch had leached from her. She studied the sleeping boy, the steadying breath. "You did well." "Only what anyone would have," Anna lied. "No," Mrs. Hartwell said after a moment. "Not anyone." She moved to tidy the side table, hand pausing over the velvet pouch. Her thumb rubbed the torn tassel. "Humph. What is it?" Anna asked. "A foolish habit," the housekeeper said. "I rub at floors when I worry." This thread, too bright. She pinched a single filament free. It flashed scarlet in the firelight, not the dark, tired red of old velvet, but the sharp hue of new silk. Anna's heart kicked. "May I?" She took the filament and held it next to the memory in her mind. Lottie's gaudy thread on a servant's needle. A match to a poor girl's eye that had spent life seeing what did not belong. Before she could speak, the Earl returned, unslept and ironed by decision. He looked older than morning, as if night had done heavy work on him. "Dr. Worsley is settled," he said. "Miss Fletcher, you will remain until my son wakes properly. After that—" "I'll go," Anna finished, because relief hurt and hope hurt worse. He studied her. Something unfastened, a buckle 2 holes looser. "After that, we will discuss." He turned to the housekeeper. "Where is Lady Pembroke's maid?" "The lady sent a note. She departs at noon. In the guest corridor, my lord," Mrs. Hartwell said. "Shall I?" "I will speak to her." He paused, then added, oddly gentle for a man whose words usually came with edges, "Mrs. Hartwell, send someone to bring up Miss Fletcher some broth." When he had gone, the housekeeper and Anna shared a glance neither could name. The older woman smoothed her keys against her skirt. "Eat, girl. You look like you'd shatter if a teacup sneezed." Anna tried to smile. When the broth came, she cupped it in both hands, the heat seeping into fingers gone numb. Edward slept, breath evening to a rhythm that invited belief. The fire settled with the little sighs of wood finishing a long story. Voices in the corridor, Lady Pembroke's, high and sweet as icing, and beneath it a sharper tone, Lottie's, kneaded into deference. The Earl's baritone cut through, precise as a paper knife. "Open your roll," he said. "My lord?" Lottie simpered. "Your sewing roll." Silence, then the scritch of fabric unrolling, the clink of little scissors, the rattle of pins. "What is this thread?" the Earl asked. "Common red, my lord." "For hems, common red," he repeated. And even from the parlour, Anna could hear him turning the words as if they might reveal dye marks. "Mr. Cross tells me the tassel of my pouch bears a filament of a near-identical shade. And you, Mrs. Lottie, lingered near my servant's stairs last night after the hour for modest women to be in bed. My lady needed me. I suspect my lady needed her brooch more." The Earl's voice did not rise. It thinned. "Blake." A footman's shoe scraped. "My lord." "You were observed in the yard this dawn, washing a stain from your cuff that lavender water would not quite sweeten. Would you like to guess what colour that stain was?" A beat of air. Then the smallest crack of a man losing a bet he could not afford to place. "My lord, Lottie only asked," she said. "Enough," Lord Haverleigh said. "You will both remain under Mr. Cross's eye until I determine how best to inform Lady Pembroke that she has been robbed by her own household, and that my maid has paid for their boldness." A gasp from Lottie, a muffled curse from Blake. The butler's calm was a dam holding back a great deal of water. "This way." Their footsteps receded. In the blue parlour, Anna realised she had been holding her breath so tightly her ribs hurt. Mrs. Hartwell exhaled first. "Well," she said faintly, "I shall need to rewrite the household report." Anna stared into the fire until her vision steadied. The relief that washed her felt dangerous, like standing too close to the sea. She looked down at Edward's hand. He still held one of her fingers, even in sleep, a habit of small courage. He stirred. "Is it morning?" he murmured. "Nearly," she said. "You're safe." He blinked up at the ceiling roses, then sideways at her. "Did I die and find you in heaven?" "You found me in your father's parlour," she said. "A lesser paradise." He smiled, a quick, boyish flash that made his illness look like a costume he might yet take off. Then the door opened again, and Lord Haverleigh returned, rain polished from his coat, but not from his face. "It appears," he said, each word measured, "that I owe you an apology, Miss Fletcher." Anna rose too fast and had to catch the chair. "My lord." The brooch was stolen by Lady Pembroke's maid, who had enlisted the help of a foolish footman. They planted the pouch while the house slept. He did not add the rest, that he had believed what he wished about poor girls and glittering things. He stood as one at a graveside of a certainty. "I am sorry," he said simply. The room swayed a little, not with fear, but with the release of carrying a weight too long. "Thank you, my lord." You will, of course, be reinstated with full wages owed, he continued. And? His gaze dropped to Edward, who was pretending to be less awake than he was. If you are willing, you will sit with my son until the doctor declares him out of danger. Anna swallowed. Gladly. He inclined his head. And when he is well, you and I will speak of references, or of perhaps something larger than references. She did not know what that could mean. A sickness of hope tried to rise. She pushed it down and sat again. Edward closed his eyes, a smile still haunting his mouth. Rest, she said. You first, he answered. The rain slowed to a polite tapping at the window panes. Somewhere, the front door opened to admit the day's post and the day's opinions. In the kitchen, a kettle sang. In the stables, a groom cursed a stone in a hoof. In the nursery, a clock cuckooed a minute too early, as if impatient for the rest of the story. Anna looked at the velvet pouch one last time. The tassel's bright thread clung to the nap, thin as a confession. She thought of Lottie's quick fingers, Blake's polished boot, the way hunger and vanity made accomplices of people who otherwise might have been kind. She also thought of the Earl saying sorry like a man carrying water in both hands, careful not to spill. Breathe, she whispered to Edward, and to herself, and perhaps to the house. Breathe and keep breathing. The house obeyed. The morning light over Haverleigh Park came slow and golden, turning puddles into mirrors and making the house look almost innocent again. Steam curled from the chimneys. Servants moved briskly through corridors that yesterday had whispered scandal. Anna had slept only an hour in a chair beside the fire, waking each time Edward stirred. Now he was propped up on pillows, pale but smiling faintly, like a boy who had wrestled with death and won by stubbornness alone. You've been watching me all night, he said, voice rough but amused. I was afraid you'd stop breathing if I looked away. Then you should have blinked less, he murmured. She laughed softly, surprising herself. It felt foreign after weeks of fear. You speak like a poet, she said. I've had the leisure of sickness, he replied. It makes everything sound profound. The door creaked open. Mrs. Hartwell entered with a tray. Broth, toast, and something scandalous. A smile from cook. She set it down and lowered her voice. His lordship asks to see you, Miss Fletcher, when you can leave Master Edward a moment without danger of death. Anna hesitated. Now? Mrs. Hartwell's eyebrows rose. Before he changes his mind. Anna brushed the wrinkles from her apron, tucked stray hair under her cap, and crossed the hall. Her pulse sounded in her ears like a second set of footsteps. Lord Haverleigh awaited her in the library, standing by the window where rain had etched ghostly trails on the glass. The air smelled of books, smoke, and remorse. He did not turn immediately. I have spoken to Lady Pembroke, he said. Her maid and the footman confessed. The brooch is returned. They will not trouble anyone again. That is justice, my lord. No, he said quietly. Justice would return what was taken from you. Your name, your peace, your belief that honesty is ever rewarded. I cannot give those back. She stood still, unsure how to meet a nobleman's apology without cheapening it. You did what you thought was right. I did what was convenient, he said. There's a difference, Miss Fletcher. My late wife used to tell me so. I never listened. He turned then, and she saw how exhaustion made him human. I will not pretend that your station allows me to repair what my pride destroyed, but I can at least offer truth. He gestured to a chair. Sit. She obeyed, wary as always when the powerful began to sound kind. When Edward was born, he said slowly, the doctor told us he would not see adulthood. His heart was weak, my wife prayed. I managed the estate and waited for news that never changed. Perhaps that is why I am as I am, a man shaped around the expectation of loss. Yesterday you forced me to see that survival sometimes comes from hands I overlook. Anna met his gaze. He's alive because he is loved, my lord. That's what gives him breath. A silence settled between them, soft but dense with things unsaid. Finally he cleared his throat. You may remain at Haverleigh as long as you wish. I owe my son's life to you. If you wish, I will recommend you for any position in London. Governess, companion, nurse. You will want for nothing. Her fingers twisted in her lap. With respect, my lord, I do not wish for comfort purchased by pity. He blinked. You think it pity? I think it gratitude, she said carefully, and I thank you for it. But I've worked all my life for my bread. I'd rather earn what comes next. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, perhaps tinged with something rarer. Then you shall earn it here. Edward's health is too frail for formal tutors. Dr. Worsley insists he study at home. Would you consider staying as his governess? Anna froze. His governess? I've read your references. You taught reading at the vicarage before you came to us. You have patience, and he listens to you, which is more than he grants anyone else. The offer felt unreal. Yesterday she had been a thief. Today she was asked to teach an earl's son. If you are certain, my lord. I am, he said. And for what it's worth, you have my apology. Again, and in writing, if you prefer. She smiled, small but genuine. Spoken will do. He inclined his head. Then it's settled. When she returned to the parlour, Edward was sitting up, spoon in hand, frowning at his broth as though it were philosophy. You've been promoted, he said. She blinked. How do you know? My father walked past, smiling. It frightened the maids. Anna laughed, then sobered. He's asked me to be your governess. Edward raised an eyebrow. And did you accept? I did. Then I shall be a model pupil. Liar. Only when it's worth it, he said, smiling. The weeks that followed remade Haverleigh quietly. Where once bells dictated every movement, now laughter occasionally interrupted them. Edward's lessons took place in the garden when weather allowed. Books spread on blankets, tea poured from a pot that steamed in sunlight. Anna taught him more than Latin and literature. She taught him to breathe, to walk farther each day, to see the world beyond the wrought iron gates. In return, he taught her not to flinch at kindness. Servants began to speak her name without whispering. Mrs. Hartwell consulted her on menus. The butler nodded when she passed. Even Lord Haverleigh stopped calling her Miss Fletcher with clipped formality, and once, when she corrected his son's French, he almost smiled. But peace is not a static thing. It shifts, tests its own foundations. One grey afternoon, a telegram arrived from London bearing Lady Pembroke's crest. The Earl read it at the breakfast table, expression darkening. What is it? Edward asked. She requests the return of the maid's confession, he said. Her ladyship fears gossip. She proposes a sum to ensure silence. Anna's jaw tightened. So she buys back her dignity with coin. Lord Haverleigh folded the paper. We will not sell truth in this house. Edward leaned back, eyes glinting. If only London knew my father could be radical. The Earl's lips curved. Do not mistake justice for rebellion, my boy. Though, he added, glancing at Anna, I see they may share a tutor. Later, when Edward napped, Anna found herself in the chapel corridor, the quietest part of the house. Rain streaked the stained glass, painting the floor in diluted jewels. She knelt on the pew not to pray, but to breathe. The past weeks had given her security, respect, perhaps even affection. Yet she still carried the fear that it could all vanish with one rumour, one change of mood from the man upstairs. "Miss Fletcher," came a voice behind her. She turned. Lord Haverleigh stood in the doorway, raincoat over his arm. "I thought you disliked the chapel," she said. "I do," he replied. "It tells the truth too loudly." He walked closer, hands clasped behind his back. "You've changed this place. I've only taught your son to read. You've taught him to live," he said quietly, "and the rest of us to listen." The compliment struck deeper than he intended. She looked down. "I only did what anyone should." "No," he said. "Not anyone." For a moment, the air between them carried more weight than words could manage. He looked as if he might say more, then shook his head. "Edward wakes when thunder threatens. Stay near him tonight." "I always am," she said. As he left, she watched his reflection fade in the stained glass. Tall, burdened, changing by degrees. Somewhere in her chest, hope stirred against her better judgment. That night, thunder came as predicted. Anna sat reading aloud by the hearth while Edward dozed. Each rumble rolled closer, until one struck hard enough to rattle the windows. Edward startled awake, gasping. She was beside him at once. "It's only weather," she murmured. "Breathe." His hand found hers. "Every time it storms," he said, voice shaking, "I dream of drowning. Do you think one can be born afraid of water?" She squeezed his hand. "No. Fear is learned, and can it be unlearned?" "With patience," she said, "and company." He looked up at her, eyes too old for his years. "Then don't leave." "I won't." The storm raged. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck midnight. She kept reading, her voice steady over thunder, a line from a book about courage that neither quite believed yet. The morning after the storm broke soft and deceptive, as though the sky were pretending not to remember its own temper. The lawns steamed, the peacocks shrieked, and Haverleigh smelled of wet stone and lilies. Anna carried a tray to the library, where Edward, wrapped in a shawl, was attempting to resume his lessons. His cheeks held a little colour now, though the effort of standing too long still drew a faint tremor to his hands. "You look human again," she said. "I feel like one," he answered, smiling. "I may even attempt Latin." "Steady yourself. No language deserves such punishment." He laughed. The sound startled the still air, drawing the butler's discreet cough of approval from the doorway. In that moment, the house almost forgot how recently it had been mourning and accusing. But the calm carried warning. Houses learn to hold their breath before news arrives. Before noon, a carriage thundered up the drive. Black lacquer, London plate, haste written in every wheel. Mrs. Hartwell appeared at the schoolroom door, pale with purpose. "Visitors from the city, my lord," she told Edward's father, who had joined them. "A man and a lady. They insist on speaking to you." Lord Haverleigh's expression shut like a door. "Show them to the drawing room." Anna helped Edward to the sofa, then slipped out behind the servants, who trailed curiosity down the corridor. From the landing, she could see the newcomers, the lady's feathered hat dripping from travel, the man's gloved hand gripping a silver-topped cane. Recognition shivered through her. Lady Pembroke and her husband, Lord Adrian. The woman's beauty looked pressed, as if ironed over guilt. Her husband's mouth bore the arrogance of a man who rarely used it for truth. "You owe us silence," Lady Pembroke said the moment doors closed behind them. "You have our maid and footman imprisoned in the village jail. Release them, and the matter ends." "The matter ends," Lord Haverleigh said coolly, When honesty begins. Adrian Pembroke's laugh was small and sharp. Do not pretend moral superiority, Haverleigh. We both know your reputation would suffer were this gossip to reach the clubs. A servant girl accused under your roof, your own son nearly dead in her company. The Earl's hand struck the arm of his chair, not in anger, but restraint. You will not use my son's illness for leverage. From the corridor, Anna heard every word and understood too late that her name was already currency again. She turned to withdraw, but Lady Pembroke's gaze snapped toward the half-open door. You, there. Yes, you. The maid Anna froze. My lady. You were dismissed for theft, were you not? The lady's tone dripped sugar over venom. And yet here you stand, restored. How convenient for your virtue that the real culprits cannot speak for themselves. They confessed in your presence, the Earl said. Lady Pembroke's fan trembled. Under duress? Do you think anyone believes a noble household could fall victim to its own staff? Yes, Anna said, before her courage could reconsider. Because I did. The silence that followed could have been carved. Lady Pembroke's eyes flared wide, not with guilt, but outrage that a servant dared shape Eyre into speech. Lord Haverleigh rose. You will leave my house. Adrian Pembroke sneered. Then you will answer to the papers. I have friends who relish scandal. Print what you please, Haverleigh said. You may find your own reflection less flattering in ink. The Pembrokes departed in a fury of silk and wheels. When the sound faded, the Earl turned to Anna. I'm sorry you heard that. I'm glad I did, she said. It's better to know the shape of one's enemy. He looked at her as though he'd forgotten she could be so calm. You remind me of my late wife, he murmured. She had that same stubborn quiet. Anna curtsied. I'll take that as praise, my lord. It was meant as such. He hesitated, as if a second thought pressed against his throat. You have courage, Miss Fletcher. Perhaps too much for this place. That evening the house fell uneasy again. Letters were written. The Earl's solicitor was summoned. Whispers seeped down to the kitchens. Talk that the Pembrokes meant to ruin Haverleigh socially if they could not do so legally. And with gossip came illness's shadow. Edward's cough returned, slight but deep. By nightfall, fever flushed his cheeks. The doctor was called but trapped by flooded roads. Anna sat by his bed, cool cloth on his brow, counting breaths she feared would stop between numbers. Don't, Edward whispered. Don't look like that. I'm only tired. You're burning, she said. I'll fetch ice. He caught her wrist. Stay. The cold makes it worse. Just tell me something true. She blinked against tears. Truth seldom comforts. Then lie beautifully, he said. She almost smiled. Once upon a time, a maid was accused of theft, and a foolish boy defended her. And did they live happily? They lived honestly, she said. That's rarer. He shut his eyes, breath evening for a moment. I'd like to see the sea someday. You will? Promise? I promise. Thunder muttered again beyond the hills. She changed the cloth, replaced the lamp's oil, whispered nonsense to keep him tethered. Hours blurred until the door opened softly and Lord Haverleigh entered, coat unbuttoned, eyes hollow. Go rest, he said. I won't leave him. He studied her. The defiance, the exhaustion, the smallness of her frame against so large a task. Then let me help. Together they sat through the night, one on each side of the bed. At times they spoke, low and halting, about nothing, the harvest, the chapel roof, the weather's stubbornness. At times they only listened to Edward breathe. Near dawn, the fever broke. Sweat cooled on his brow, his pulse steadied, and he sighed the sigh of the living. Anna leaned back, eyes closing in disbelief. Lord Haverleigh exhaled, long and quiet. "You've saved him twice." She shook her head. "He saved himself." "No," he said, looking at her with something almost like wonder. "You taught him why he should." The next day, sunlight poured through unclouded glass. The doctor arrived late, blustering apologies, and declared recovery imminent. Mrs. Hartwell wept discreetly into her apron. Even the peacocks sounded pleased. At luncheon, the Earl addressed the staff. "This house owes Miss Fletcher a debt beyond coin. She is henceforth under my protection and employ as tutor and companion to my son. Any tongue that questions her honour will answer to me." The servants cheered softly, a domestic revolution conducted in whispers. Anna felt her face warm under the attention. When she looked toward Edward, he raised his cup of water in salute. Later, alone in the garden, she found herself beneath the old elm where her disgrace had begun weeks earlier. The air smelled of damp leaves and forgiveness. Footsteps sounded behind her. Lord Haverleigh again. "I received a telegram," he said. "The Pembrokes have withdrawn their threat. Their own servants began to speak in town. It seems truth travels, even without invitation." "That's a mercy," she said. "A consequence," he corrected. "You taught me the difference." They stood a moment in the hush of the garden. Then he said quietly, "You may go anywhere now, Anna. London, abroad, a school of your own. But if you choose to remain, know that you are wanted, not owed." She looked up at him, at the man who had once been her accuser and was now, impossibly, her ally. "I think," she said slowly, "Haverleigh still has lessons left for me." He smiled, the first true smile she had seen from him. "Then we shall study together." From the upper windows, Edward's laughter drifted like birdsong. The house, for the first time in years, breathed without shame. And on that quiet morning, when the light spilled gold through the mist, the story of the maid accused of theft ended as all good tales do, not with wealth or rank restored, but with dignity returned, and the promise of new beginnings under honest sky. Spring returned to Haverleigh Park like an apology. The river swelled with clean rain. The orchards bloomed in scandalous pink, and the windows of the great house gleamed without shame. 5 years had passed since the morning the house learned to breathe again. Some rooms still whispered the old gossip for sport, but their voices had softened with dust and time. The scandal had become legend, the legend a story of redemption that mothers told new maids when the world looked unfair. Anna Fletcher, now Mrs. Fletcher in the ledgers, Miss Fletcher still to those who loved her, stood by the garden wall with a basket of papers, watching a group of village children recite verses under the tulip trees. Edward, tall and lean, but never truly rid of the fragility in his lungs, sat on the stone bench, reading aloud with more enthusiasm than accuracy. "Begin again," she said, smiling. "Slowly this time, or they'll learn your mistakes instead of your lesson." The children giggled. Edward mock-bowed. "Yes, Miss Fletcher," he said, eyes bright. "You'll never stop calling me that." "Habit," he said, "and reverence." From the path, Lord Haverleigh approached with his usual deliberate grace, a walking stick more for style than need. The years had not erased his severity, but softened it into something almost warm, like an old statue finally content to stay outdoors. "Miss Fletcher's school thrives," he said, surveying the laughter. "The vicar tells me half his congregation can now read their own prayers." "Then he'll have to shorten the sermons," Anna replied. He smiled. "The estate accounts look better for it too. Fewer accidents, fewer complaints. Knowledge, it seems, is cheaper than ignorance. Edward looked up from his book. And far more dangerous. The Earl chuckled, a sound that once would have startled the crows. You quote her too often. Better her than the philosophers, Edward said. They rarely tell the truth as plainly. When the children had gone, Anna gathered the papers. They'll come again Thursday, she said. The older ones want arithmetic next. I always said numbers breed rebellion, the Earl murmured. Yet I find myself approving. Anna hesitated. You never told me why you allowed it, opening the gates to the village, letting the children learn here. It's not the sort of generosity most peers advertise. He looked out across the meadow, where the mist clung like memory. Because once, he said, a girl I misjudged taught me what happens when doors stay locked too long. The breeze lifted her shawl. She turned away, blinking against sunlight. You give me too much credit? Impossible, he said simply. Edward rose, closing the book. Father, he said, shall I show you the orchard? The bees are drunk already. In a moment. Edward nodded and wandered ahead, whistling something bright and tuneless. The Earl waited until he was out of earshot, then spoke again. He'll take on the estate soon, he said quietly. He's ready. I've arranged for him to travel. Italy first, perhaps. The air there is kinder. He'll thrive, Anna said. He's stronger than he knows. The Earl studied her. You've had much to do with that. Only encouragement. And courage, he said. It comes in shorter supply in men than in maids, I find. They stood together a long while, listening to the bees and the far-off laughter of Edward calling the dog. The air smelled of blossoms and wet earth, the scent of beginnings disguised as endings. At last, the Earl said, When he leaves, you must decide what you'll do next. Haverleigh is yours if you wish it. The school, the house, the peace you've built. But if you'd rather return to London, I will see you settled. She looked up at him, sunlight catching the silver at his temples. You've already given me more than I ever dared want. What is that? A name I don't have to defend, she said softly, and a home that remembers who I am. He nodded once, as if acknowledging a contract signed in older ink. Then stay. Let the house keep earning its forgiveness. That evening, as dusk stitched lilac thread through the sky, the three of them sat in the library with lamps lit low. Edward sketched plans for the new schoolroom. The Earl read the papers without pretending interest, and Anna mended a curtain torn by years of use. Outside, the wind combed the grass in quiet rows. At one point, Edward looked up and said, Do you remember the night I collapsed in the rain? The Earl frowned. I'd rather not. Anna smiled faintly. I remember thinking you'd ruin your father's best coat. I remember, Edward said, thinking that if I died, at least I'd have proved someone wrong. His father sighed. You did both. The laughter that followed was gentle, tired, genuine. When it faded, the room settled into peace so complete that the house itself seemed to breathe along with them. Years later, when travellers stopped at Haverleigh, they still spoke of the place with curiosity. The nobleman who opened his library to farmhands, the young heir who taught lessons among the orchards, the lady who had once been accused of theft but left the county richer in knowledge than any banker could count. And if anyone asked how such change began, the old housekeeper, now mostly deaf but still proud, would say simply, with a brooch, a lie, and a maid who refused to be silent. She would nod toward the portrait in the library, the one of a woman standing beside two men, her eyes neither lowered nor pleading, only steady. Beneath it, On the plaque, 3 words: Honor restored, 1909.